So in this video, I wanted to talk about a few really common editing mistakes that I've made as a filmmaker, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other filmmakers run into without even noticing. We're also going to talk about some things that you can do to avoid or fix them so that you're able to make better videos with almost no extra effort. So we're going to start off with something that I'm still trying to figure out for myself, and I see a lot of other people having issues with, and that's getting the pacing of the video right. Now, pacing is one of those things that's gonna vary from video to video, and what you go for is really gonna depend on what story you're trying to tell and how you want to make the viewer feel. A faster paced video is going to help with making it feel more dynamic and full of energy, and a slower paced one can feel calm or help to build up some tension. So once you've figured out how you're hoping to make the viewer feel, there are a few things that you can do to help with pacing your videos better. The first one, and one of the most important ones in my opinion, is if you're the one filming the footage, always hold your shots longer than you think you need to. Trust me, this is something that's going to help you more than you can imagine later in the edit. When you're putting together your video, if you have a clip that's held longer, you can always decide how much you want to cut off of it, but on the other hand, if you've got a clip where you stopped filming way too soon, you can't really do much to make it longer after the fact. Holding your shots, even for an extra 10 seconds, can make a world of a difference for whether or not you're able to nail the pacing in the final thing. Plus, even if you're not going to be the one editing the footage later, it's a skill that other editors will love you for because you're going to be making their jobs a lot easier. This is a super simple concept, but ever since I started applying it, it's been super helpful to me both as an editor and a filmmaker. But let's say you're only going to be editing the footage that someone else shot. Obviously, if you're able to talk to the person that's filming, it's a great idea to try and communicate what story you're trying to tell and how you want the video to be paced. That way you can ask them to apply that piece of advice for holding their shots longer, and it's gonna make things easier for you later. Of course, that's not always gonna be possible, so something that I'd recommend is always making sure to go through all of the takes of every single shot and trying to find the ones that were held just a little bit longer so that you're able to give yourself more wiggle room to decide how and when you want to cut them. One more quick piece of advice I want to add to this point is a concept called killing your darlings, and this essentially means that sometimes you'll have a shot that you really like, it looks beautiful, it feels beautiful, but it just doesn't help tell the story well, and it throws off the entire pacing of the video. In those cases, you just have to bite the bullet and cut those awesome clips out completely in favor of telling a better and more well-paced story. The next mistake is one that I see a lot more with beginner editors, but sometimes it does carry over to people who have a little bit more experience as well. And this one is all about how you use motion graphics and effects. Sometimes you might find a pack of titles, overlays, or transitions and decide to pick it up because it looks cool, and that in itself isn't really a problem. I'm someone that believes that if you use those types of asset packs and plugins correctly, it can save you a lot of time and effort while still allowing you to make good-looking videos. It becomes a problem when you start feeling the need to fit in as many of those assets that you picked up into every new video that you make, and the real issue is a lot of the time they're just not going to be appropriate for every project. Trust me, this is something that I have first-hand experience with, and I know it can be really exciting to pick up some cool looking titles and then you want to use them absolutely everywhere. The thing is, as an editor, it's very important to know when and where it makes sense to use that sort of stuff. And honestly, I think it's something that comes with experience. At a certain point, you'll need to have a lot of self-awareness to be able to look at your editing timeline and think, you know, I'm probably using too many assets here. I think that using that type of stuff tastefully is much more impressive to the viewer than just like throwing absolutely everything a pack has to offer and hoping that you're impressing people just by sheer volume. Plus, it's also very important to think about whether or not the asset that you want to use actually fits the theme and the style of the video that you're working on. So sometimes getting rid of a title here and an effect there can definitely make your video feel more professional. When it comes to stuff like motion graphics and effects, a lot of the times less is going to be more. So while we're on the topic of motion graphics and effects, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Motion VFX. Chances are you've already heard me talking about Motion VFX before in some of my previous videos because I use a bunch of their products all the time. They've got a huge library of plugins and asset packs that they're constantly adding new stuff to, and I'm pretty sure that regardless of what type of projects you work on, you'll be able to find something on their website that ends up making your editing workflow a lot faster. Like I said, using motion motion graphics and effects well really comes down to making sure that they fit the theme of your video, and that's why one of the most important features with the plugins from Motion VFX is just how customizable they are. You pretty much have full control over how each asset looks, so you're able to change things however you need to so that they match the look you're trying to get for your project. Obviously, you still need to have a good feel for when you should use them, but the fact that you can adapt pretty much any asset to any style of video makes things a lot easier. So if you're interested in picking up any of the products that Motion VFX offer, you can go ahead and click my link in the description, and you can also use my code George10 at checkout for an extra 10% off your total. It's a great way to help me out, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. Once again, thank you to Motion VFX for sponsoring this video and just supporting the channel in general. The next mistake I see a lot of filmmakers make when editing is pushing their color grades way too hard. And this can actually happen for a couple of reasons. A lot of people will see a film or a TV show that has a nice color grade and they'll want to copy it, and in some cases they might even get pretty close to the look they're after. Unfortunately, not a lot of people consider that for a grade to work, you usually have to make a bunch of very intentional choices when filming in the first place. That's why, as a filmmaker, you have to be really clear about what look you want to give your video later when grading before you even start filming. You have to make sure that stuff like lighting and set design and wardrobe are all set up in a way that can support the grade you want to go for, because if you just decide to not pay attention to any of that stuff and just like fix it in post, chances are you're gonna need to push your grade way harder than you actually can, and the image is just gonna crack and start falling apart. Something else to consider is what camera color profile the footage was shot with. So with something like a RAW format, you're gonna have a lot more flexibility in post, but if you don't have access to that, using a log color profile will still be much better than shooting with one that's baked in. The bit depth is also pretty important, and even though you can still get a lot of information out of 8-bit footage if you know what you're doing, something like 10, 12, or even 16-bit footage is gonna give you a lot more room to be able to color grade before everything starts falling apart. This is especially true when working with stock footage. Depending on where you're getting it from, chances are it's probably already going to have baked-in colors, so a piece of advice that I can give you is to try looking for stock clips that already match the final video look you've got in mind kind of closely. That way, if you need to color grade them as well, you're gonna need to do a lot less work, and you can make sure that things don't end up looking bad. In general, kind of like with motion graphics and effects, less is gonna be more with color grading. Skill is still gonna play a huge role here, but I think that the more you can get right in camera, the easier you're gonna make it for yourself later. The next thing I want to talk about is watching your edits over and over way too many times. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's actually something that hurts your videos a lot more than you'd expect. The reason this is a problem is because if you keep watching your edits back every time you make a change, you're never really giving any of those changes enough time to sit to see how they fit into the final thing. It's something that I used to do a lot back when I was just getting started with editing, and I'm pretty confident when I say that it's something that's made a lot of my videos much worse than they probably could have been. Sometimes you'll watch an edit back when you're halfway done with it and think that a clip doesn't really work well, so you just kind of replace it. But then when you've gone through the full edit, you might realize that clip would have worked pretty well in the context of the final thing. And in the same way, you might keep watching your edit back and thinking that a clip works really well, but when you watch the final thing, it turns out that it's probably not the best clip that you could have picked for that moment in the video. To avoid this mistake, what I do nowadays is I'll make an effort to put together my first version of the edit in a way that's as close as possible to my original idea for it. And only after I watch that first draft, I'll start trying out different things to see if anything clicks better. Usually, seeing that first edit for context makes it much easier for me to know what other direction I might want to take the video in later. Otherwise, it's essentially like I'm making decisions about the final video based on like half an edit, which just ends up wasting a lot of my time because I end up having to go through a lot more changes that way. One more quick tip that I've got is to take breaks while editing. Go for a walk, grab a snack, go to the gym, or like have a nap, and then come back after that and watch your edit. When you've been looking at your project for a really long time, you start to kind of miss some of those little details that matter. It always helps to step away for a bit and give your brain some time to kind of process everything that you've done so far, and then you can look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and maybe notice things that need to be done differently. So I guess the advice I'm trying to give you is to be a bit more patient when putting together your edits and actually giving the changes that you make some time to sit so that you can get a feel for what they're doing for you in the context of the final thing. The final thing I want to mention is that you shouldn't be afraid to just start over when you've got a gut feeling that something in your edit isn't working. This is something that you're probably going to learn as you gain more experience and confidence as an editor, and at a certain point you're going to start trusting your instincts more to a point where you can easily tell when an edit isn't going how it should be. Sometimes starting over with a different approach is going to be the right call, and it's going to end up saving you a lot of time and headaches instead of just trying to push through a mediocre edit. That being said, I'd still recommend not entirely deleting any work in progress edits until you've landed on one that you feel works well. Instead, maybe just copy over your working timeline, or something that I occasionally do is leaving a gap on the timeline and building my new edit right next to the old one so that I can reference it if I need to. It might seem weird, and it's probably not the best way to do things, but so far I've had a decent amount of success this way, and it's helped me build edits for videos that I can be satisfied with. So hopefully you found this video helpful. I hope that these pieces of advice are something that you're able to take with you going into your next video project. And who knows, maybe they end up being useful. As always, thank you so much for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next one.